Like Jesse said, my name is Charlotte and I'm a scientist, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about what it's like to be a scientist, what it's like to live in China, and specifically what it's like to study snow leopards. I think I have one of the coolest jobs ever, and I'm really excited to tell you guys about it, and specifically why snow leopards are important and why we should conserve them. So I'm gonna go ahead and start by just showing you where exactly in the world I am. So let's see here. Let me make sure I do this right. All right. Can everybody see a map on the screen?
We can.
Does it
You're
look like
all
everything's
set.
going right? Everything's good?
Yep, you're perfect.
Perfect. All right. So just to give you guys an idea of where I'm at, over here on the left-hand side, we have the United States, Canada. I'm actually from a little state on the East Coast called Delaware originally. And I grew up always really liking being outside, and I really loved animals, but I always thought that if I wanted to work with animals, that I had to be a vet or a wildlife rehabber or something like that. It wasn't until I was in college that I learned about conservation biology and conservation science, and that I could actually do research to save at-risk species. So species that aren't really doing well in the wild that need a little bit of extra help. And that led me to my job now, where I study snow leopards in China. And I'm specifically based in Beijing. So where that red star is, that's the city I live in China. It's the capital of China. It's a huge city. There's about 25 million people that live here. So it's a lot of people in a small space, but it's also a very old city. So there's a lot of really cool things to do and some really interesting history. And then about once every 2 months, I, along with my research institute and the people I work with, we go out to the Tibetan Plateau in Western China.
Oh, Charlotte, your audio cut out for a second. Let's see if we can get you back. Oh, there.
Are you there?
Hey,
Sorry.
the briefest of interruptions. You're
Okay.
back though.
All right, I'm gonna try it again. Sorry guys, my internet is not great.
Keeps it exciting.
Okay, let's try again. Okay, so now I'm just gonna talk to you a little bit about snow leopards and what I do, but a lot of my work is on the western end of China on the Tibetan Plateau. And you guys have probably seen snow leopards before. You might know what one looks like. So they're big cats. They're closely related actually to tigers. A lot of people think they're more closely related to common leopards, but snow leopards are actually their own species, and they're more related to tigers than other big cat species. And so snow leopards have really, really cool, unique features that allow them to live at high altitudes in mountainous environments. And so they have this really thick and dense fur that keeps them warm in the cold. They have a really long, bushy tail that allows them to steer through the mountains as they're climbing through. And they have these really huge feet that kind of act as snowshoes for them to move through their environment on the snow. And snow leopards are really, really important because they're apex predators. So this means that they're at the top of the food chain. And so they control basically the populations below them. So other species that they eat are kind of kept in balance in the ecosystem. So without snow leopards, without predators in the ecosystem, things can go out of whack really quickly, which isn't good for the environment. Despite us being able to recognize snow leopards, we've all probably seen one, maybe you've seen one at a zoo, there's still a lot that we don't know about them. Specifically, we don't know how many are left in the wild. We're not even sure the distribution exactly, so where are snow leopards even found? We don't know exactly what they eat, and we also aren't too sure about other different parameters or things that are important for their survival. And so one of the things that we are doing is trying to study them to learn more about them so that we can conserve them. But this is hard because snow leopards live in really remote environments where humans can't thrive, right? So it's really difficult at high altitudes because there's not a lot of oxygen. And so it's really hard as a researcher to be in there to get into snow leopard habitat. It's also really cold, and it's a really hard habitat to climb through and traverse. On top of that, snow leopards are very, very well camouflaged with their environment. So I always joke that a snow leopard has probably seen me a dozen times, but I've actually never seen a snow leopard in the wild, even though I could have been looking right at one, because they're so well blended. So in this picture, it's hard to tell because the snow leopard is on snow. It's kind of out in the open. But typically when we see snow leopards, they're going to be alongside the mountains and the rock sides. And so I want you to pretend right now that you are a snow leopard researcher and you are looking for a snow leopard. There's a snow leopard in this picture. You can see at the bottom there, these are blue sheep. That's like a snow leopard's favorite food. And I want you to try to find the snow leopard. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo? I promise you there's one in there. So I'll give you, I don't know, like 10 seconds. Remember, they're really well blended with their environment. They can be really difficult to spot. And if you look really closely, you'll see that the snow leopard is right there. So where I circled it, it's a little bit hard to see because the picture is a little bit pixelated, blown up, but you can see that there is actually 2 eyes and a face sticking out from the rocks there inside of that white circle. Even their own food item, these blue sheep here, they don't even know that they're about to get eaten. That's how well blended snow leopards are. And they're also very quiet. We often think of big cats as growling or roaring like a tiger or a lion, but actually snow leopards kind of have a really puny yowling, meowing sound that they make, and really quiet. All right, well, one more. I'll give you one chance to find the snow leopard. This one I think is a lot easier, but it's still pretty tough. So pretend you're the researcher and you're trying to look for a snow leopard in the wilds. And it's right in front of you, and you know it's right in front of you. I'll give you 5 more seconds. All right, so there's the snow leopard. So in the circle again, and then if you look off to the left hand side there, you can see this kind of peeking out there with 2 eyes, right? The snow leopards are really hard to see and they're really difficult to study, and that kind of leaves us with limited options on how to study them. But we have some ways to get around this. So instead of actually seeing a snow leopard in person, we can use a couple tools to study them non-invasively, which means we can be kind of out of their environment and just collect the things that snow leopards leave behind or pictures that we may capture of them. One of the ways we do is through camera tracking. So this right here attached to the rock is called a camera trap. So think of it as a fancy digital camera that's really, really sturdy. It can hold up against the elements, right? And what happens is we put it up and we put it in an area where we think we might be able to find a snow leopard. And then we have a motion sensor on the camera trap that when an animal walks past it will be triggered to take a picture. And so when the camera trap takes a picture, we can then take that picture and look at it later off of the SD card in the camera. And sometimes we can get some really, really great photos. So for example, this is a photo of a snow leopard that we got from a camera trap. And so with this particular, are you guys still there? Nobody's moving.
Oh no, we're there. We're good.
uh.
Yep, there's a little delay, but we're good, Charlotte.
Okay, we're good. Okay, sorry, everyone is frozen on my side. Okay. So what we can do is we can get pictures of snow leopards and we can tell things like how many different individuals are in an area because they have these unique different spots. So we can tell them apart. And we can also get an idea of, are there cubs present? So are there baby snow leopards present? Maybe we get a picture of them. Or we can look at other behavior aspects to learn more about snow leopards. So another thing that is really cool with camera trapping is that we can find out new information about snow leopards. So for example, we used to think that snow leopards were solitary, meaning that they hang out by themselves. They don't really have best friends other than coming together to breed or kind of accidentally running into each other's territories. They don't really interact much with each other. But now through some of our camera trapping work, we're learning that snow leopards actually hang out in groups quite a bit, or at least more than we thought they did. So for example, in this picture, there's 3 snow leopards here. They might all be related. It might be a mom with some older cubs or something like that. And then if you look in this picture, there's actually 4 snow leopards. So 1, 2, 3, and then there's some beady eyes down there in the corner. And so we can learn new things about their behavior as well using camera trapping. is really cool because it gives us more information and helps us identify areas where snow leopards may or may not be present and how we can help protect them in those areas. But one of the last ways that we can actually study snow leopards is by finding what they leave behind. So finding an actual snow leopard is difficult, but finding their poop is not nearly as difficult. So one of the things we do is we walk around and we pick up poo. So the polite term for it is called scat. That's actually poop from cat species. And so what we can get from this is actually a lot of information, because in each scat sample that we pick up is something called DNA. So each of you're made up of trillions and trillions of cells. All living life is made up of these cells that you can't see unless you look under a microscope. And in each of these cells is something called DNA. And DNA is basically the code that makes you, you. So inside each of your cells is this information that basically dictates what color your hair is, how tall you are, different personality traits, the tastes you do and don't like when you eat, all sorts of things. Everything is coded by this DNA. And it's unique to only you. No one has it, but you get DNA from your parents. Whoever you're related to, your DNA is more similar to them than to say a friend that lives down the street that you're not related to. We can get this information, this DNA from snow leopard, through their scat. And so what we do is we pick up the scat and we put it in a tube and we take it back to the lab. And then we actually extract the DNA out of each and every single one of those cells. And we do a series of different laboratory techniques to actually read the DNA. So just like you would read a book, we read the DNA and we look at that unique structure and unique composition of the DNA to actually tell individuals apart from one another and to tell who's related to who. So if I pick up 10 different scat samples and I look at the DNA, maybe 2 of them have the same DNA and 3 of them have the same DNA and the rest all have different DNA, then I would know that there's 8 different individuals living in that area. Similarly, I can see how related they are. So I can see if there's any siblings present. I can see if there's maybe a mom and cubs present. And I can also look at their genetic diversity, which is really important in breeding efforts to make sure we have a good, healthy population of snow leopards living in the area. And what else is really cool is that we can also look at the DNA of what the snow leopard ate. So just like the DNA of the actual snow leopard is going to be in that scat sample, so is the DNA of the goat or the sheep species or whatever else they ate. And so one of the main things we're trying to figure out is how can we use this technique to see what snow leopard are eating. So can we look at the DNA of, say, a blue sheep like you saw in that first picture to be able to tell what the snow leopard ate by just looking at its scat. And this is important because being able to understand what snow leopards are eating really helps us look at the entire ecosystem to see how healthy it is. So if snow leopards are eating a lot of blue sheep, then we know that there's a good population of prey, of food for snow leopards to eat. If snow leopards are eating food that they don't typically like, or maybe they're eating herders' livestock. So in a lot of snow leopard habitat, herders live and have goats and sheep and yak. If we find that kind of animal in snow leopard scat, and then we know that the snow leopard ate that, then that might tell us that they're having trouble finding food and that this might be an area where we need to focus more on conservation efforts for the prey items as well. And so there's a lot we can learn from poop, and there's a lot that we can learn from camera mapping, and those are ways that we can study snow leopards without actually having to bother them or touch them. It's really helpful because snow leopards are so difficult to study and there's still so much that we don't know about them.